The Day That Friday Lost Her Bone by Timothy Kimmel Jr.
Friday pulled the chain taut and wiggled out of her loosened collar without needing Bear's help. She had woken up that morning expecting to chew on a big fat moose bone, a whole shoulder that her people had left her. But it was gone. And so was the buried moose bone that she had from the other day. She dug up the very same spot that she buried it and couldn't find it. Bear came by shortly later after that and noticed that she was in a bad mood and asked her why, and she explained to him. He agreed to help her look for her lost moose bones, but if she didn't find it, she could have some of his. So she slipped her collar. She breathed a sigh of relief, it having been easier than expected. Bear gruffed a quiet bark of excitement and satisfaction. "Quick," she said, "before my people come out for their morning chores of chopping wood and gardening, pulling weeds from the old woman's garden."
You are quite a good girl.
Bear barked in admiration, but it was more like a growl, and nipping at her ears affectionately. "There's no time for that," Friday said, exasperated. "We have to look for my lost bone." Chided and feeling slightly scolded, Bear set off immediately, and she followed, stopping not at all and sticking to the wild woodland areas and long shadows of morning, hoping to avoid any human contact. They would be back with her bone or Bear's if they could not find hers before any humans noticed. Hopefully, they would think her slipped collar was an accident and not know she had left at all. It was early morning, and the sunrise cast a golden pink array of colors splashed across the sky. Patchy stratocirrus and cumulus nimbus dominating what would become a truly blue stretch of horizon, and a beautiful day. Dandelion flowers, having curled into themselves during last night's cold, dark spell, were just starting to stretch out under warm sunshine's ministrations, dancing their traditional hulu dance. Little small twirls and shimmies, dandelions mostly looking the same. It was almost as if one was watching a moving picture of them as their flowers unfurled right in front of Friday and Bear's eyes. They skirted fenced yards and homesteads, weary of any signs of people and careful to sense with their noses and look for signs of humanity, sticking to the long shadows still cast by the tall cottonwoods, birch and spruce. Friday was almost all black with a white patch on her chest and 3 white-socked feet. Bear was brown as a brown bear, hence the name. They both bore the floppy-eared, with one ear bent over and the other perked up, and listening. Common in Labradors. Larionets to catch larionet, to keep to chain to vindicate Larionets. Friday and Bear stopped over at their friend Felix's before heading to Bear's to chew on his leg of moose bone. For Friday didn't get her bone, what's next? Thursday, Wednesday, Tuesday might end up missing their bones too.
And those ladies were tough.
We should all have a bone every day. Yes, that was the only way. Get one bone every day, a bone a day, but Friday had lost her bone and all her subsequent bones as well. They had all went missing, mysteriously and without warning, leaving a big old question mark in their wake. But Felix had not seen her bone either, and they quickly left the small, quaint little homestead, everything neatly stacked and in its place, as if they knew no other way besides use. Before any of Felix's people woke up and noticed them, slipped collar and everything, I bet they made quite a sight. Bear flashed back to his human life. He was at university, walking through a hallway in the music department, bored after his art class with his favorite teacher that year, but only because he helped design Tundra Comics. He started whistling a tune, but wanted to whistle a tune common among Seminole Indians and whistled at football games. However, he did not want to whistle that either. He felt a need to pull at and pull forth a more personal tune, a song that would transform his feeling in the moment by describing his symptoms and let feeling pour forth from inside him to a tune realized by reality and capable of having a life of its own. And that is exactly what happened. One instrument picking it up in a locked room where they were supposed to be practicing a classical piece of music presumably composed by a composer, perhaps Beethoven, Mozart, or Bach, Johann Sebastian Bach. Flight of the Bumblebee, classics and sweet. Another instrument started playing what he had just whistled. It was pretty good. Surprised, he almost stopped whistling, a freestyle, but of the same root. Then went back to what they were playing, whistling more closer to their original each time. That's it! Eureka, he thought, by the time he finished whistling and walking down the hallway and heading towards the doors at the main entrance, choosing the one right next to the last on the right and walking out another directly in front of him. All of the instrumentalists supposed to be working on pieces of a classical piece for performance at year's end were playing his whistle instead. Slightly amused, nobody noticed or knew who started playing his music after first whistling except for him. He never told anybody and still hasn't. Sometimes he wonders if they ever made it into any kind of symphony, but only idly and not with any greedy notions. Friday nibbled at his right ear affectionately. Having been right in front of him, it was easy to turn right around and give him a hard little bite, snap him out of his daze. When she noticed he had stopped suddenly for no reason. "What was that?" he asked. "You tell me," she said. "You just stopped for no reason," she asked in a whine, slightly anxious and worried. Had he sensed that, smelled, or heard any humans? She hadn't, of course, and had just as good as senses as him. Yet it was said that some dogs possessed another sense, than just 5, as was common. Although she did not put much faith in that legend because hers were strictly a normal hand, but she had been friends with Bear and around him long enough when he was not too hard up and well guarded. He had learned to relax around her, and so she hadn't turned around him, yet she could not help but notice certain strange tendencies to know and sense danger or game when there was no way he could possibly know. Following his gut and on instinct alone, saying nothing and saving the day and her but exactly whatever it was, keeping her out of trouble, knowing when to sneak out and when to come back, but also having knowledge of other people besides his own, their whereabouts and habits. He said she would pick it up eventually. He also always knew where to look for food, aside from hunting, also who to ask for treats, and whether they were territorial canines or more territorial humans than their dogs were, trying to impress while maintaining their ancient ritual of dominance and possession. Custom that most dogs honored without thinking about it, as part of their class and society, privileged to be mankind's protectors, a first century in line of defense, in charge of looking after their children and women folk, as well as to be a man's best friend. How did you guess that I would kill off both main characters in the end? Having lived a long life and no longer able to get about, their suffering finally ended, allowed to become human after the honor done to them. It is my responsibility to such dog loyalty and my honor as well, and honor to them. You can't choose who you are, but I treat it like Schrodinger's cat. Is the pussy dead or alive? Both. That way I make the same decision every time. Come up with the right answer every time. Let's just go to your place so we can gnaw on your bone, Friday intoned with an air of anxiety, given into her stomach with finality. It's almost breakfast anyway, she whined. Bear did not mind. His people had given him a big hunk of hindquarter bone with the hoof still attached from a huge bull moose Papa shot with his .30-06 last Thursday, and after they had stripped it of meat and flesh in a time-honored tradition, what was referred to as women's work, had then given to their faithful guard dog and friend the aforementioned moose bone, ubiquitously and with ceremony that to an outsider would have looked like nothing at all. Just some native girl, young woman really, giving her favorite dog a treat, or perhaps a reward for years of loyal service and love. They skipped Spot's place in search of her bone and headed straight for Bear's. It was getting late anyway, and any minute now people were going to be up and about. Even after late night revelry, most people would tell their humans about it. Having recognized Bear and Friday and knowing everybody's business, they did not want their regular visits to end or made more difficult, so they kept their contact to a minimum. Being great friends and potential mates, and both increasingly aware of that last part, they would keep looking for Friday's bone after, but for right now opted in instant satisfaction over possible frustration, as was a dog's wont. "It's in my doghouse, not even buried yet," Bear said, as they were drawing closer to his human little farmstead. It was really cozy, with such a big family, 6 people, not including dogs, all at various stages of life. It could get pretty crowded in a one-room cabin, not including the small squeeze into attic space, which was also used as a bedroom for one of the teenagers. A boy who was always reading and kept to himself mostly, finding freedom and escape in those books. He was always reading. As Bear overheard his human's mother and father arguing one time about. The shadows were still heavy on their cabin's doorway as he and Friday made their way around back to his nondescript gray with a triangle for a roof and black roofing hammered to it to stop the rain from leaking in to his doghouse. The sun was almost up. Last incandescent purples and golden pinks still mixed in with clouds and disappearing as sunshine brightened, turning into day all around them. Bear tensed, almost to his doghouse and coming towards its entrance, stopping suddenly and ears perked, standing straight up. "Something's wrong," he said, his sixth sense they never talked about sensing mischief, or his keen nose picking up some foreign scent, maybe a combination of both. Before Friday could ask what was wrong, he was already inside, and a frustrated yowl of disappointment mixed with anger and denial issued from his throat. Friday winced, not only in embarrassment hearing a grown male dog make that noise, but out of trepidation of it being heard by a human. "Where's my bone?" Bear said, frantic with panic sinking in and evident in his rushed and anxious growled words. She relaxed, but only because he said it more quietly than his intonations moments before, but not at his words. A sudden sense of deja vu and a chill running rampant down her spine with a sinking feeling. Hadn't the same thing happened to her earlier? Had she said the same thing? She could not remember, but doubted she had been as frantic and embarrassing as Bear's continuing display of anxiousness. Searching one spot and then another, all over his yard, even digging up some old holes, presumably in search of his big moose bone, with gristle still on it, and a hoof too. "You're taking too long," Friday said. "I'm hungry and it's getting late." No, we have to find my bones. It is important. We cannot stop looking until we do. First your bone, then my bones. There's a bone thief at loose. We better warn the whole community. We cannot let our bones go that easily. What kind of person steals a dog's bones? What kind of person or canine?" she said, an idea brightening her face. "Come, I know who to ask and help us warn the rest of the community faster. We'll put it out on the line. A rooster crowed, cock-a-doodle-doo, meaning one or more of Bear's people would be out and about in a minute. I do not know what's going on, but I have a feeling our community already knows. I cannot go that long without my bone in the morning. I know. Me neither, she said. Oh yeah. Let me check one more spot. Hungry, please. I do not want to get caught again. Hurry. I did not get my table scrapped last time I got caught. She paced around nervously while Bear attacked one last spot in his yard furiously and with purpose. Eureka! Bear said happily. My bone! He pulled out a piece of moose rib bone. Want to chew on it? I don't know. It's kind of small, she tensed. Oh, come on, you big lug. We got to go. She grabbed his moose rib bone, which was actually quite large and slightly meaty, and scampered off. Tail in the air, with dignity and purpose, and the air of a lady. I know, Bear said to himself. You are always right. What's that? Nothing, coming. And he ran fast to catch up with her quick pace and graceful movement. She was surprisingly fast for being smaller in stature and with shorter legs, and her endurance was amazing. He struggled to catch up. Slow down. What's wrong? Can't keep up? Coyly and with a sense of humor in her rough yap. That was almost a growl, but definitely not a yip. No, definitely not a yip. He let the thought trail off. Where are we going anyway? He asked incredulously, stomach growling so loud he was pretty sure she could hear it. He looked at her enviously. She stared back at him, remembering that he had not had any breakfast either, and it had been an eventful morning. Oh, here, she growled in disgust and tossed him his juicy rib bone back, which he caught in the air and began crunching immediately. You sure? He said between a mouthful. She just stared, and he kept crunching. He was bigger than her anyway. Besides, she wanted her bone, not his, no matter how juicy it seemed and how hungry she was. Saved you some, he said with ironic amusement and low, harmonious growls. She looked at the beleaguered pieces of moose rib and sinew that he had just deposited on the ground and thought, oh, what the flea. I missed breakfast and went at it with a need, finishing the small meal with enthusiasm. Her enjoyment was thanks enough for Bear, and he growled a laugh bark of amusement. What, you know where we're going? The only place we can. There is not any law hereabouts except for Brutus, village public safety officer extraordinaire. Her question having prompted her to answer his previous question. Brutus was faithful servant, guard, protector, and friend to human public safety officer Bruce, so the subsequently shared duties, liaisoning as a communication easement between man and their best friend. Those two, they're useless, and both with a couple kibble loose to collar. Might as well ask a doggy bag for help. Would be more likely to happen. Bear was upset. Is this the best they could do? Unfortunately, he didn't see any alternative either. Resigned, they set out again for Bruce's lot. It being Sunday and not a churchgoer, he was almost definitely at home at this hour, and his wildly eccentric pug, Brutus, was assuredly there as well. Most people look like their dogs, is what is commonly known, yet there could not be a more opposite pair in the whole world than Bruce and Brutus. Personality and B-names aside, personality maybe. What they did not have in looks, they made up for in similar strangeness that most dogs would say they couldn't quite put their nose to. Brutus was small with a stereotypical curly dark hair and button nose of a pug, but his ears were triangular and laid on his head like a chihuahua's. It was said his bloodline was not as pure as his pedigree pretended, but never say or hint of that to Brutus, because he was liable to attack viciously and without thought, having been teased tremendously as a pup, and because of his station was liable to get away with a bite or two of almost anybody, humans included. Bruce was tall, brown thinning hair that thinned at the front around his hairline and bangs, but not as much on top, which seemed to be the norm. He had kind of blue eyes, and they were kind, and a reputation as a know-it-all. Aside from his weird balding and personality faults, he was considered a decent VPSO. Better than his predecessor, yes indeed, better than old Joey Presto, who was a huge lush before he retired and kept his long-honored tradition of alcohol abuse still to this day, slowly sinking towards an early earthly resting place in his family's burial lot, along with the rest of his ancestors and his dog Winnie, or Weenie as she had sometimes been called with affection. Maybe it was part of a VPSO's position as a public servant, but Joey had never married, and Bruce seemed to have followed his lead in that one specific area of his life, if nothing else. But it was probably just a coincidence. Maybe nobody had encouraged him enough. The word encouragement has courage in it. Then again, so does discouragement. Bear's thoughts suddenly turning to Friday, or maybe they had been there the whole time, heart beating a little bit faster and a heaviness around his ears and limbs at the thought, a kind of warm buzz, or maybe it was her strict pace, obviously in a hurry to find out where her bones were buried, and his too, he hoped. Her bones gone and his missing as well? He could not help suspect there was a bigger mystery here than originally thought. He should have asked Felix if he had any bones missing. Oh well, they would get to that question and have it answered anyway after talking with Brutus. The rested canines here in McGrath, with its easement into Xanth, a magical world rediscovered by Piers Anthony, or discovered by Piers Anthony and rediscovered by me right now. Although that was a completely different story, those canines would be up and about by now and alerted to any strange activities such as missing bones and any unusual smells. Brutus's cabin was farther away from Friday's than was Bear's, so they were already well on their way there. Friday's people's home was situated next to the Kuskokwim River and just past a seacoast, heading towards their local laundromat, which took quarters and was unattended except for customers. And showers were also available, but bring your own soap and towels, not to mention footwear at Chief Isaac Andrews building. Most people killed two birds with one stone, showering while doing their laundry, and while it was getting done, if they had already showered, just waiting around or going out for a cigarette, or took off to chill with their friends that lived around there. Local library was also part of the same building, along with their water treatment facility, which cleaned the river water and supposedly made it more drinkable. Yet they went a little too heavy on bleach, rendering their drinking water almost undrinkable, which is why most people let it set out for so long, like that helped, or captured rainwater or bought bottled water if they could afford it, and left their treated water strictly for washing dishes, clothes, and themselves. Excess bleach can lead to stomach problems, colonoscopies at a young age, rashes, and hair loss, not to mention other diseases related to stomach problems such as diabetes. Bear would rather drink from a mud puddle or straight up from the Kuskokwim River, which is almost as famous as the Yukon, although not quite as big. At least it was alive and would not lead to dehydration and possible premature death from drinking treated, quote-unquote, cleaned water, with the emphasis on cleaned and not water. Ironically, a standing rock in a harder place. It was one of those situations that could bring a person to tears with frustration and anxiety, getting mad at reminders even. It did not feel safe and made parents worry for their children, making sure that they received good water, either bottled or rain-caught water, left sitting in their fridge for 24 hours, or juice, maybe even milk instead. And parents biting the bullet and drinking bleach water either as coffee or tea, usually wondering what is wrong with those humans at the water treatment plant. Have they tried their own product? But they were on bottled water too. Some locals even applied to work for their local water treatment organization in hopes of making it better, but were flatly turned down. All other employees having been grandfathered into their position through family connections and reluctant to give up their cash cow they were milking, blissfully unaware or just ignorant about their faults and faulty work and havoc it was causing to their community. not just with their elders, but young children alike, some with colonoscopy bags. People pretending they did not know why their young child could not defecate, or just choosing to ignore it when the reason for people's health problems was obvious, but usually blamed on alcoholism. I guess kids there start early on that baby bottle is what doctors figured, but meanwhile there were signs going up around town about dangers of too much bleach consumption and associated health problems. It could be worse, people say, and would probably take this thought wrong, feeling helpless and yet passionate about certain subjects, blindly attacking intelligence and reason just for reminding them of their fault in a matter they let get worse and worse. Angry at themselves, but unable to admit that, being a dog in the sticks, it was better to keep your mouth shut just sometimes, so as not to get kicked for having smelled their local disease. Life being hard enough for a dog in the sticks, although a lot more like heaven than city life. They had just passed the Alaska Department of Natural Resources, situated on the left in a great big clearing full of grass and airplane landing strip on the right. Brutus's homestead was just ahead, past Anderson Field, headed left from this direction. They would be there in 5 minutes top as they slunk and creeped through woodland dominated with stunted spruce and birch, carrying the elusive chaga, which is very healing for native folk, and not just around here, but everywhere, regardless of skin color and tone. They were ducking from tree to bush to log, and from shadow to shadow, the sun just kissing the tops of the trees, already in their zenith of growth. Trails in a fairy tale woodland just left of McGrath's main road, headed towards Anderson Field, where a bluegrass festival was held every year as part of the celebration of life and subsistence lifestyle dominated by a traditional harvest, foreshadowed with doubt, but ever an optimist. Those village elders, caretakers of our land and majesty, keeping us safe, warm, and well fed, harvest after harvest, turning disaster into foreseeable obstacles. They were coming up on Anderson Park. Another left and they would be at their destination. Brutus's chief public safety officer and liaison to the law, that human grift and curse all at once realized whichever side you endured ended up being on when the chips fell and you were left counting heads of who was still standing around, twiddling their thumbs, humming in this our celebration of life and harvest. They slunked through bushes rife with pine needles in a well-broken-in trail on a back way towards Brutus's office, which was just his doghouse in the back of VPSO Bruce's homestead, a run-down, shabby ex-fur trapper's cabin built in the in 1965, or was it 1964? Oh well. Seasoned spruce logs cut into Lincoln log style pieces and then fitted and pitched. Concrete poured over a dug out foundation before his homestead. Well, his father's actually, since he inherited his slice of pie, had even started. Bruce was alright, but Brutus could be a pain sometimes. They barely noticed recent activity around his backyard that indicated Bruce had successful and fattening harvest during this year's moose hunt. He wasn't a very good hunter, but people gave him a lot of gifts based on his position. Cutbacks for looking another way, and Brutus had apparently struck it rich. My lucky stars. Look at that, whispered in passing. He must have hit the jackpot. And indeed, there was exponentially heavy evidence of intense planting of buried bones. Brutus was a pug, but rumor had it he had some Chihuahua in his bloodline way back, making his puggy eyes even more bug-eyed, and his torn right ear from some past fight, no doubt a victory if you asked him about it, lent him a feral, almost pirate look. His eye patch for Halloween really set matters straight on that note. They went around back and rang the bell attached to a rope signaling business. And in Scotland Yard, old English tradition, Brutus came to his flap of a door over his luxurious doghouse, the law sparing no expense for their dog. Representative of VPSO, renowned in McGrath and local legend hereabouts for solving mysteries and starting scandal more often than not. After chewing too many bones and partaking of
Root beer.
noxious
Lee sweet. Soda pop.
homemade brew that could set a hair straight up and leave any dog and a few cats moon-blinded
From the sugar high.
with civil disobedience, intrinsically spun off the high gravity of the stuff. Brutus was just rubbing sleep from his eyes. He looked like he had hardly slept at all. Late night, bear barked, question and greeting, his question gruff and unnecessary. Traditional harvest, Brutus laughed, hacked in response, shooting a huge wad of phlegm and goodness knows what else out of his nose, gelatinously. "What can I do for ya?" he asked, still coughing up phlegm. "Looks like you could use to lay off that rub beer," Friday replied coolly. He just looked at her. "Well, I've a lot of work to still do. Traditional harvest, you know. And you're interrupting my nap." Brutus growled. "Looks like you've done a lot of work already," Bear said, glancing at evidence of freshly buried bones. "Oh, that," he said innocently. "Traditional harvest, rites of passage, you know. Bruce always gets a little extra from tourists come out here to hunt when he takes them out to the lodge and back to the B&B. You know that already." greased the wheels a little. Off the top, must have been some Harvest, Friday growled, gruffly, sounding more like a male dog. Mind if we take a look around? Say, it's early, and I should be sleeping. What did you say you were here for anyway? I think you know. I have no idea, Brutus spit belligerently, hacking up more phlegm. Geez, maybe you're right about that root beer, he said, suddenly friendly-like, the flick of a switch. What brought you here? I have a lot of work to do in preparation for winter. Looks like I'll be starting early this morning. Tell you what, Bear said earnestly, we'll help you finish your winter preparations, bury bones, and help take stock of your stores. But we have a little problem, and I bet that there will be more like us showing up any minute. Brutus, said an anxious, excited voice. Hey, Brutus, you up? It was Felix, the dog they were going to see earlier. My bones, Brutus, somebody stole all my winter catch. It's a travesty, sir. A downright travesty. What am I going to do? Felix said, close to tears. Brutus looked at Bear and Friday, his detective instincts kicking in. I assume that Felix's problem shares a connection with why you are here, Brutus asked coyly. Brutus, I sense that the mystery of Felix's stolen bones is just the tip of an iceberg, a mystery that this whole town is part of. Friday woke up this morning expecting to munch on her share of a juicy moose leg bone, full of gristle and meat scraps, only to find it gone. Gone, I say, and the rest of her catch as well. My catch of bones was also missing. I would not doubt and bet a similar problem has occurred all over town, and any minute more dogs will be showing up and asking for help. Have you noticed any unusual characters in town, or any missing bones from your cache? I don't know. I was up all night burying bones, given to me from Bruce for being his loyal friend as part of our traditional harvest, as evidenced by all that disturbed dirt you no doubt noticed earlier. But I'm pretty sure all mysteries are accounted for, and all my bones as well. They would probably have skipped over my place or be saving it for last, being too much activity here last night, and me being the law and all. They? Friday Bear and Felix asked at the same time. Whoever stole yours, and no doubt we'll have more dogs showing up here soon. Bones. It's hard to believe that many bones could have been lifted under our noses without anybody noticing. It smells like an inside job to me. What do you mean? All three victims asked unanimously. I'm not sure yet. We need more information first. But my guess is that my cache will be next on their list, it being no secret that Bruce is handsomely rewarded for his service as VPSO, and therefore we're bone rich. They'll probably hit my place tonight or tomorrow. I could use all three of you to help me keep watch, and with luck, and if we follow our noses, we can catch these perpetrators and get everybody their bones back in preparation for winter and those cold, hungry months. What do you mean, perpetrators? Felix asked, the question that was in both Bear and Friday's throats in a low, almost threatening growl. There's no way that many bones could have been stolen from all three of you with just one rogue dog, assuming nobody noticed until this morning. Too many possibilities of events going wrong. It would have been difficult for one dog to make off with just Friday's bones, let alone all three of you that we know of so far. There had to be an accomplice, somebody to make the theft and get away smooth in case of alert. It was probably too easy. Nothing of this magnitude has ever happened here before. You've heard of the great bone thievery of 64 that occurred in Nikolai, right? They whined in acquiescence. Well, that took 3 mangy mutts, all related inbred husky mastiffs that they know of. My guess is we have at least 2 criminals at work on this grift. Well, we need a plan of action. I'll stay here with Friday, and Felix and Bear can go around town and get a list of dogs' missing bones and any unusual activity. Look for churned up earth and any missing dogs. If we find a bone cache unclaimed, then the perpetrators are sure to be back for it at some point. Bingo. Then we'll have solved our mystery. That was how it was done in 64. Actually, Felix can go to the airport and find out if we have any strange dogs in town. You know, dogs who smell funny or have a criminal history. That will leave Friday and me to guard the fort here at home base. She can help me finish burying the rest of my moose bones Bruce gifted to me last night for years of faithful service in matters like this and as part of our traditional harvest. As much as Friday disliked the idea of spending any time with the truculent Brutus, it was quickly decided he was right. And Bear and Felix left with haste to solve this local bone heist mystery. Besides, he was helping her find her missing juicy moose leg and the rest of her catch. So Bear and Felix took off, leaving Friday to contend with Brutus and his scrutiny. They had lived in the same town their whole life, and Brutus was content with reminding her that he was old enough to be her father, which irritated her, yet was true enough. She was going to help enlarge his winter catch by digging some extra holes in their indicated place based on evidence of recent activity, but was quickly reprimanded when Brutus came over and asked her rudely, "What do you think you are doing? Snooping around over here, young lady? Surely you don't think your bone ended up in my catch somehow?" His tone and manner were completely at odds with their situation. Undercurrents of anger, accusation, and hostility dripping from his eyes and the way he stood there, all intense and ready to spring. "Don't make another move towards my catch." The threat was implied, overtly suggestive of violence and a promise of reckoning. "But I thought..." She let her words trail off, confused and cowed by his manner. She was pretty sure it had been night instead of early morning still, that his eyes would have glowed red with unspoken dominance and menace. Her blood chilled, and she felt a tingle run along her limbs and up her spine, making the hackles between her neck and shoulder blades stand up. She tensed in preparation for battle, animal instinct still sharp from when her ancestors were still wild and hunted in packs before human domestication and the advent of civilization making most basic instincts seem unnecessary. But they were still there, deep down, buried, and surprisingly strong. A thrumming call of the wild, and that flight or fight instinct almost made her lash out unnecessarily. For having seen her stop and make no further move towards digging, Brutus had backed off. He had made his point, and her obedience had made any further move on his part unnecessary. Geez, what was his problem anyway? She wondered. Must be his old bones aching from early morning chill, although dandelions were in full flower, and there had hardly been any frost on the grass for very long this morning. Oh well, no telling how an old dog's bones felt at his age. Friday was only in her third human year, and little more than a pup to Brutus. A fact he felt a need to remind her of with every move she made, getting a reprimand and a lecture on dogs these days. Didn't know anything. Why, back in his day. And don't you know nothing? How old are you anyway? Why, a puppy would know better than that. And on, etc. Friday could not wait for Bear and Felix to get back, but wait she must, so she bore the weight of his remarks and critical attitude reflected in his stare and stance. It almost felt like he was trying to get rid of her. They certainly were not accomplishing any chores in relation to his catch, being any closer to being done in preparation for this coming winter's brutal reality and harsh reminder where they lived in this remote corner of Alaskan wilderness, a paradise of undomesticated wildlife and a bastion for wild wilderness habitat. Despite her prestigious ancestry and feral canine instincts, her hopes were sinking concerning this year's harvest. Traditions are made and should be honored for a reason unless they harm the ones who made them or their offspring, in which case times change and denial of change can lead to disastrous results. She kept that in mind as she hunkered in a corner of Brutus's doghouse, having been allowed to do nothing in terms of helping Brutus with his catch. Tired of his belligerent attitude and abusive, barely contained hostility. If she had been born male instead of
a good girl,
would he have treated her differently? But she had a sense that he would have still been hostile, if not more polite, depending on her position in the pack of McGrath's domesticated dogs, companions to human beings, all part of an agreement between humans and their canine friends, some referred to as canine brotherhood, and shaming any politics associated with canine-human relations. Probably just his old bones, she smiled inwardly at this thought, closing her eyes to catch a quick cat nap before Bear and Felix showed back up, hopefully with good news. But she didn't want to get her hopes up, and so let the thought trail off as sleep overcame her troubled, cloudy mind. Heartbeat slowing along with her breathing, deepening towards peace.
Unbeknownst to Friday, Bear had come up with a plan while he and Felix were out scouting their neighborhood for clues and information about missing bones from any local dogs. A gust of wind whipped up and flattened both their ears before dispersing and not being felt again that day. Weird, Bear thought. Yet weather in Alaska could be weird and fickle sometimes. I'm going back to my homestead to check on my people, Bear growled, low in his throat, boding no argument from Felix, who just looked at him, grinning in acquiescence. showing all of his large and yet slightly blunted teeth from excessive bone gnawing. Bear left without a word, but instead of heading back to his home, he went back to BPSO Brutus's canine headquarters, located out back from BPSO Bruce's log cabin, which had been built by trappers in the 1960s. He quickly made his way to Brutus's doghouse, only to find Friday asleep. "Come on, wake up," he barked at Friday, excitedly. Hearing his excitement, Friday was instantly alert. "Good news," he said. "What you found? My moose bone?" Friday growled hoarsely. Still tired from just waking up, Bear's face fell slightly. "No, but my humans just killed a huge bull moose, and if we make it back to my place in time before I get in trouble for running off, then they'll give me an even bigger share of bones, with meat and gristle still on them." Friday stared at him, not knowing what to say. She knew that his people were all still at his homestead, probably doing wood chores, unless some relative had come along and given them some of theirs. "That must be it," she thought, and I'll share with you," he gruffed, excitement once again creeping in his voice. "Get up, we have to go at once." They both ran off before Brutus could say a comment. Brutus thought it sounded like quite a catch. Before Brutus could comment. When they were out of Brutus's hearing, although she did not have Bear's sixth sense, sensed a rat about Bear's behavior earlier, he did not usually act in that way, preferring to take his time even when in a hurry. He had never rushed her like that before, although it could be their unusual situation and lack of sustenance, thanks to whatever bone thief had heisted theirs in McGrath's canine bone catches. "What's going on?" Friday asked in a quiet yap of inquiry. Bear knew Friday was a highly intelligent female dog and respected her immensely, as well as finding her attractive, and was not disappointed that she had figured out how his story did not quite add up. "New plan," he said. "The story I told you earlier was a lie." He paused for a moment, just a few breaths to let the gravity of his words sink in. "And she prompted?" He finished, continuing on. "And now Brutus thinks I have a gold mine of a cache of bones in my backyard. All we have to do is dig some holes, and Brutus, with his big mouth, will tell Felix and every canine in McGrath about my good fortune." He paused again, then continued. "And if I have enough to share with you, then it must be worthwhile. We'll just wait in hiding, and while they think we are asleep, we'll catch our bone thieves. It should only take a night or two before every dog in McGrath knows of our good fortune." "Good plan," Friday barked happily, realizing his excitement earlier hadn't needed to be faked, although misdirection from its actual source. They went to his backyard, dug some fresh holes to make it look like a huge bone cache, and settled down to wait. Friday was thankful that Bear's humans were so generous with their portions, having served Bear his regular dinner of dog food, leftover meat, and water. They did not notice her hiding behind Bear in his big doghouse, and just assumed Bear was hunkered down and taking his daily nap. He would usually go out and greet his humans with tail wagging and possessive yet loving lick kisses. There was more than enough for Friday and him to share, and he couldn't and be content, if not completely full. Bear suspected that it might take a few days before any more bone thievery, only because whoever the thieves were, they were probably alerted with knowledge that McGrath's canine element would also be on high alert. Guarding any bones they had left, but he was mistaken. Shortly after 2 a.m., although it was still light, being interior Alaskan verging on summer twilight, made ghosts and weird shapes twist and shimmer in one's sight, playing tricks on eyes and mind alike, making it difficult to tell what was real or just imagined. Bear and Friday took turns napping, waking each other before every nap, so there was always at least one canine, senses trained to any unusual smells and sound. Alert and on guard, about 10 minutes after 2, Friday heard a noise, which sounded like an animal or two closing in on Bear's backyard. She nudged Bear, but he was already awake, having been alerted earlier through sound and his sixth sense. They waited tense and expectant until they had heard digging ensue. They had to be quick before their intruder realized it was a trap, having found no bones. They quickly and quietly exited Bear's doghouse, tensed in combat mode ever since alert to any danger, closed in on their quarry and pounced. A yell of pain ensued as Friday and Bear bit and clawed, tearing pieces of flesh and ear from their adversary. Their enemy's blood was disgusting and tasted unhealthy. They quickly had their enemy pinned, whoever it was, being much smaller than them, and waited this way until it grew lighter. The dog under them was huffing and wheezing, trying to get his breath with Bear's and Friday's combined weight on them. As it grew lighter out, with sunrise just starting to think about making its appearance, they noticed a familiar and rather funny figure under them. "Brutus," they both said together. "No, you got me all wrong," their captain said in a thick Jersey accent. "I'm Phil," he whined piteously as the first rays of sunshine gathered their excited photons together in a rush to help flowers open and give tourists and locals sunburn. Friday and Bear noticed some subtle differences between Phil and Brutus. Phil was much fatter, and his fur was far shorter, like it had been shaved recently. That, combined with his accent, gave credence to his insistent plea that he was in fact Phil, not Brutus. "Well, you understand why we were confused, don't you?" Bear growled, deep and menacing, but calmed down, noticing Phil's fear, and said less threateningly, "You look almost exactly like Brutus and smell almost just as bad. So you'll let me go?" Phil pleaded, whining incredulously and slightly surprised. "I didn't say that," Bear said once again, growling horrendously deep and menacingly. Phil seemed to shrink into himself at this point and went limp in complete surrender. "I think Brutus has some explaining to do, and thus the mystery of the day Friday lost her bone was solved." They took Phil forcefully to BPSO Bruce's backyard, where Brutus was still sleeping, waking him rudely. "What the? What is this?" Brutus whimpered with fear, panic seeping into his tone, his whole body shaking with panic akin to shaking with excitement, but a whole different ballgame. An icy hand clenched at his heart, spreading towards his throat, making it difficult to breathe. Bear growled an echo of his growl earlier, but more menacing, with hints of lethal intent. Brutus pissed all over his leg, not even bothering to lift it. "It's over," Friday yipped Chipper, and Brutus knew it was. Although Bruce was still BPSO, his dog Brutus and his twin brother Phil, the fatter of the two, were outcasts of McGrath's canine society from then on. Friday and Bear, with Felix's help, gathered McGrath's canines in Bruce's backyard, and they proceeded to clean out Brutus's stolen cache, reclaiming each and every missing bone, only leaving those that were already there before they were not they were not thieves after all, and refused to be like Brutus and Phil, who were both whining dejectedly. If any bones go missing again, we'll know where to find them. A random dog barked in warning to the two thieves. It took a while before everyone had all their bones, and a feeling of peace and happiness descended on McGrath, Alaska. McGrath had a new canine BPSO in Bear with his newfound wife and assistant deputy BPSO Friday, and they led McGrath canines into an age of glory and wonder, the likes of which had never been seen before. The end. For now.